Hi there folks, so today I'm going to be showing you how to make this alien egg texture using polystyrene and spray paint. So the first thing we're going to start off with is by taking our polystyrene and we're going to be breaking it apart and trying to break it down into the individual polystyrene pellets that are often what cause a nightmare. Things like Christmas when you're unboxing things and it's just getting everywhere. We're going to use that to our advantage. So all we're going to do is break up the polystyrene and rub it in between our fingers to create all these little pellets. And the best thing to do is get a nice tray or a dish, something that's quite deep to stop the pellets kind of jumping out. I'm just using a tinfoil tray here to keep things simple. Once we've got those pellets, we can then take one of two approaches. So the first approach, which is the main technique in this video, is all we're going to do is put some PVA on a base or whatever surface we're working on, and we're going to sprinkle those pellets on. It's going to be quite messy, don't worry about that. This is very much a trust the process kind of technique, but we're just going to very loosely put those on. Some of the bits may fall off during this whole technique, but don't worry about that. The less control you have over this, the better. The other side of the technique, we're going to mix those pellets up with a bit of PVA to create a paste, which is, a lot of texturing processes, but that's going to limit the effect when we get to kind of the big stage, if you like, of this technique. And we're going to show you both so that you can see the comparison. Once we've allowed that all to dry, this is where the technique really happens. So this whole technique depends upon the chemicals within, most hobby shop spray paints. So I've got Citadel's Chaos Black here. I've got some Humbrol acrylic spray paint, and I've got some cheap Paint Factory stuff. All three of these contain solvent. You can tell that because it says it on the back of the can. And if you read the label in particular, you'll see that it contains acetone. This is what eats away at polystyrene. As you can see in the video now, I've just sprayed both samples with, in this case, the Chaos Black, and that acetone is what's now dissolving the polystyrene. With the texture that has the polystyrene balls not mixed in with the PVA, that effect is almost instantaneous, and you can see, once we've allowed that to dry, that the paint has almost completely eaten the polystyrene away, leaving the outer shell, which creates this whole texture. When you compare it to the sample, which I've got here, where we've mixed it with the PVA, after two really good heavy coats of that, it hasn't quite dissolved as fully. It's kind of, mushed it down a bit and created more of a rocky surface. Whereas the example where we have just sprinkled it on, the PVA isn't forming a protective layer, so we've really taken that back. Obviously, you can control this by how much you're putting on, how lightly the coats are, and whether or not you're using PVA to create a barrier. But in order to create this effect, the acetone's completely eaten away at it, leaving the shells, and you've got this beautiful kind of alien-like texture, which I've gone ahead and painted to create the impression of broken shells. There's all different paint effects we could do with this, but once that's eaten away, we're pretty much there. So in the painting process, going into that into a bit more depth, I've started off with some Vallejo violet ink just to create a nice deep purple hue, and then I've gone in with initially I started off with Vallejo's yellow fluorescent, but it's not particularly pigmented. It's a little too thin, so I then mixed it with a bit of white just to bolden that out and saturate it a bit. The base, I've gone in with some Vallejo Express colour just to add a little bit of contrast, and then after neatening everything up, you are left with the finished product. This is a really fun technique, really accessible. Polystyrene you can find in most bits of packaging, and the spray paint, as I said, really cheap stuff. This Paint Factory I think I got from Boys for a couple of quid. Basically anything that contains solvent, you're good to go. Just be mindful of the fumes, of course. But a really fun texture to make, and I hope you enjoy.